He stood in the bathroom light before sunrise, the kind of quiet that makes a man hear his own thoughts a little too clearly. The mirror gave him back a familiar face, but not a familiar feeling. There were no dramatic revelations, no thunderclap moment from the sky, just the steady, uncomfortable truth that had been waiting there for years. His shoulders had rounded forward from long days at a screen. His energy had been flattened by late nights, quick meals, and excuses he had learned to say with ease. And somewhere beneath all that fatigue was a question he had avoided for far too long. If this was the state of his body, what had it done to his mind? Most men are taught to separate the two. Strength is for the gym. Thinking is for the office. Willpower is something you either have or you don't. But life has a way of exposing that lie slowly, then all at once. He could feel it in the small moments first. The hesitation before difficult conversations. The fog that settled in after lunch. The way discipline leaked from one corner of life into another. He told himself he was tired, busy, under pressure. Yet the truth sat heavier than any weight plate. A weak body does not stay confined to the body. It seeps into posture, confidence, patience, and the quiet belief a man has in himself when no one is clapping. At the kitchen counter, half a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, he looked at the calendar. The unfinished plans, the unread messages, the responsibilities stacking up like a wall he no longer wanted to face. He had tried motivation before. It burned bright for a week and disappeared by the next weekend. He had promised himself new beginnings on Monday mornings, after holidays, after stressful seasons, after things calmed down. But things never really calm down. A man either chooses discipline, or he slowly hands his life over to drift. That morning something shifted. Not because he suddenly felt inspired, but because he felt the cost. The cost of carrying weakness into another year. The cost of becoming smaller in his own eyes. And in that sober silence, a different answer began to emerge. Not more talk. Not more intention. Iron. Resistance. The honest struggle of a body under load. The kind of effort that does not flatter you, only reveals you. If this sounds familiar, you already understand the puzzle. The body speaks before the mind always listens. And once a man hears it, he cannot unhear it. The question is not whether his life can change. The question is whether he is ready to begin where most men refuse to start. At first, he did what so many men do. He explained it away. The fatigue, the irritability, the fog in his head, the way he avoided mirrors and photos and even bright light in the morning. He told himself it was stress, age, work, bad luck, anything but the truth standing quietly in front of him. But the body is honest in a way the mind often is not. Keeps the score. And when a man begins to neglect it, he does not simply lose strength in the gym. He loses something deeper. His posture softens. His breathing gets shallow. His voice loses its edge. His attention drifts. He starts reacting to life instead of meeting it. One evening, standing alone in the bathroom, he caught himself looking like a stranger. Shoulders rounded forward. Eyes tired. Face carrying the weight of years he had not truly lived, only endured. He heard his own voice in the silence. This can't be all there is. It was not a dramatic moment. No music. No miracle. Just a man finally recognizing that his weakness was no longer hidden. It had become visible in every part of him. That is where the puzzle begins to open. Because the problem was never just the body, and it was never just the mind. It was the quiet agreement between the two to stay small. He had been feeding himself poorly, moving less, sitting more, and wondering why his confidence felt thin. He had been treating discomfort like an enemy, when in fact it was the message. The body was asking for challenge, for resistance, for order, for the kind of discipline that tells a man, "You are not finished yet." So he made a decision that seemed simple from the outside and terrifying from the inside. He would return to iron, not to impress anyone, not to become someone else, but to remember who he was before comfort took over. He started lifting with humility, with bad form at first, with trembling arms and a mind that tried to bargain every step of the way. Yet every session became a small confrontation with the truth. The weight did not care about excuses. It only responded to effort. And something remarkable began to happen. As his body adapted, his mind followed. He stood taller in meetings. He spoke with more clarity. He stopped apologizing for existing. The gym was no longer just a place to build muscle. It became a place where he relearned how to suffer on purpose, how to keep promises to himself, how to become harder to shake. You can see it in men like this once they start changing. Their gaze steadies. Their decisions improve. Their whole life begins to organize around a stronger center. If you have felt that quiet decline too, you already know the question is not whether your body matters. The question is what it has been trying to tell you. And once a man is willing to listen, the next step is no longer mysterious. It is simply waiting in the weight room. He did not change overnight. That is the first truth of iron, and it is a truth most men resist because they want a dramatic rescue, not a disciplined rebuild. At first, his new life looked almost insultingly ordinary. A pair of worn training shoes by the door. A bottle of water on the counter instead of another cup of coffee. Early mornings that felt heavier than the weights themselves. The mirror still showed the same face, the same tired eyes, the same body that had been neglected for years. But something inside him had started to move. The first days were humbling. His breath came fast. His grip failed before his pride did. His body complained as if it had been betrayed, which in a way it had. Every rep became a conversation with the part of him that had been lying for too long. I'm too old for this. I'm too busy. I'll start on Monday. He had heard those voices for years, and they had made him smaller, softer, more hesitant. But now, under the barbell, those excuses sounded weak. Not because pain is magical, but because resistance tells the truth. It reveals whether a man is leading his life or merely surviving it. And slowly, the body began to answer back. Shoulders opened. The spine straightened. The walk changed first. Then the way he entered a room. He noticed it one evening at the grocery store when an older woman stepped aside and said, "You look like you carry yourself differently now." He smiled, almost embarrassed, because he knew she was not talking only about posture. He was carrying himself differently because he had started carrying responsibility again. That is how the puzzle begins to assemble. A stronger body does not just look better. It changes the chemistry of self-respect. Sleep deepens. Food choices sharpen. Focus returns. A man who lifts with intention begins to notice where else he has been weak. He stops avoiding hard conversations. He stops collapsing at the first sign of discomfort. He starts seeing that discipline is not a mood, it is a muscle. And the remarkable thing is that once trained under pressure, it starts appearing everywhere else. He began to wonder, standing between the dumbbells and the mirror, how much of his anxiety had been disguised weakness. How much of his depression had been inactivity. How much of his confusion had been the fog that comes when a man has no physical standard to meet. The answer did not come all at once, but it came enough to keep him moving forward. And if this is already beginning to sound familiar, if you can feel the weight of that truth, then you already understand the next step is not optional. He started with something almost laughably small. A walk when he did not feel like walking, a set of push-ups before the excuses could fully form, a slow breath that reminded him his body was not an enemy but a neglected ally. First, it felt absurd. Could a few minutes of effort really matter when his mind had been fogged by years of fatigue, stress, and self-betrayal? Yet the body is honest in a way the mind often is not. It keeps score. It remembers every night of poor sleep, every meal chosen out of convenience, every hour spent collapsed in a chair staring at a screen. And then, something subtle began to happen. The man who once slouched through rooms began to stand a little taller. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because his spine had been asked to carry more weight, and in carrying it, he learned he could carry himself. The gym became less a place of vanity and more a place of truth. Iron does not care about moods. The barbell does not negotiate with weakness. It simply waits, silent and unforgiving, until a man either meets it or retreats. Week by week, he returned. Some days he lifted well. Some days he was humbled. But every session gave him a message his old life had never taught him. Resistance is not punishment. It is instruction. The burn in his muscles became a lesson in patience. The trembling in his arms became proof that growth was happening where comfort used to live. And strangely, as his body grew stronger, his thoughts grew cleaner. Decisions came faster. Temptations lost some of their grip. He stopped asking, "How do I feel?" and began asking, "What needs to be done?" His family noticed before he did. A wife who had grown accustomed to hearing complaints heard fewer of them. A son or daughter saw a father who no longer looked defeated before the day even began. At work, his presence changed. He spoke with more certainty, not because he had become arrogant, but because he had become anchored. Strength training was revealing a deeper truth. Discipline in one area of life spreads. A man who can endure one hard thing on purpose becomes harder to manipulate, harder to discourage, harder to break. And yet, this is where the puzzle becomes even more interesting. Because the body is not only reflecting the mind, it is shaping it. Every rep is a vote for identity. Every act of self-respect rewrites the inner script. If you have ever wondered why confidence feels so rare in a modern world built on comfort, distraction, and weakness, the answer may be simpler than you think. The path back is not hidden in motivation, but in daily confrontation with resistance. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. At first, the change did not feel dramatic. There was no trumpet blast, no instant rebirth, no magical morning where he woke up suddenly fearless. It began in quieter ways. He stood a little straighter when he entered a room. He stopped collapsing into his chair like a man apologizing for his own weight. He learned to breathe deeper, to hold his shoulders back, to meet his own reflection without looking away. The iron did something the screen never could. It gave him honest resistance. It did not flatter him, it did not negotiate, and it did not care about his excuses. It simply waited. And every time he chose to lift, push, carry, or endure, he was having a conversation with the part of himself that had grown soft, passive, and tired. In that conversation, something old and important began to return. He noticed it first in the mornings. The fog was thinner. The excuses came slower. Even his voice sounded different, less hesitant, less apologetic. A man at work asked, "You've been different lately. What changed?" He almost laughed because the answer sounded too simple to be true. "I started doing the hard thing every day," he said. But the truth behind those words was deeper than exercise. He was no longer avoiding discomfort. He was training himself to meet it. And once that began, life started to rearrange itself around the new standard. He ate differently because he had begun to respect his own body. He slept better because he had earned fatigue in a real way. He focused longer because his mind was no longer being pulled in 100 directions by constant stimulation. The man who used to feel weak in private found himself becoming calmer in public. His patience improved. His posture changed. His presence changed. Even the people close to him could feel it. This is the puzzle most men miss. They think confidence comes from thought alone, but thought follows state. If the body is drained, the mind becomes vulnerable. If the body is disciplined, the mind becomes organized. If the body is trained to endure, the spirit begins to trust itself again. The barbell was never just a barbell. It was a teacher. It taught him that pain could be chosen, that effort could be repeated, and that strength is not an accident but a practice. If this is starting to sound familiar, perhaps it is because you have felt it too. Maybe not in the gym, but in the way your energy has been leaking into the wrong places. Maybe not in your muscles, but in your habits, your posture, your silence, your self-respect. And if you know a man who needs to hear this, give the story a like so it can reach him too. Because the next question is not whether weakness affects the mind. The real question is whether you are ready to stop making peace with it and finally build the body that can hold the man you are becoming. And that is where the puzzle finally comes together. What looked like a problem of mood was never only mood. What looked like laziness was often exhaustion wearing a mask. What looked like a weak mind was, more often than not, a body that had been neglected for too long, sending quiet signals of defeat into every corner of life. He stands there now not as a perfect man but as a man in motion. His shoulders are back. His breathing is deeper. His eyes are clearer. He no longer confuses comfort with strength. He understands that every hard rep, every walk taken when he wanted the couch, every meal chosen with discipline instead of impulse, was not just training the body. It was teaching the mind how to lead. This is the part many men never hear when they are younger. Confidence is not a sentence you repeat in the mirror. It is a posture you earn. Resilience is not a gift you are born with. It is built under resistance. Self-respect does not arrive out of nowhere. It grows when a man keeps his word to himself, especially when nobody is watching. He begins to notice something else too. The same discipline that helped him show up in the gym now shows up at work, at home, in conversation. He listens better. He reacts less. He no longer feels like life is happening to him. He feels responsible for the man he is becoming. And that responsibility, once feared, now feels like freedom. If this story sounds familiar, it may be because it is your story too. Maybe your body has been whispering the truth for years. Maybe your energy, your posture, your focus, even your courage have been asking for help. If so, start with one honest decision today. Do not wait for motivation. Build iron. Build structure. Build the kind of body that gives your mind something stronger to live inside. If this message spoke to you, give this video a like so more men can hear it. And tell me in the comments, what is one physical habit you are ready to rebuild right now? If you want more conversations like this, subscribe, because the next one may be exactly the reminder you need to keep becoming the man you were meant to be.